Hello, today I want to talk to you very briefly about the relationship between a sense of belonging and well-being in men and women undergraduate physics students. So the first concept I wanted to introduce is the concept of the social cure. This is something I think is particularly important at the moment given the pandemic we've just been through, as a social cure is the idea that those that have strong sense of social connections and a strong sense of social support networks tend to report higher levels of well-being and general health. Um, it's not the case that those that have strong social support networks face less hardship in terms of their well-being, but rather they have a better social support network and a greater sense of ability to cope when these problems arise. And we think this could be applied to education. Students are often faced with academic difficulties, academic challenges, and we think that having students have a strong sense of social support and encouraging a sense of belonging within the classroom might help improve students' sense of well-being. This is something that's been recently studied relatively recently studied by Walton and Cohen, who have examined how an introduction of a belonging intervention impacts particularly underrepresented students. They found that when they introduced this intervention that helped bolster belonging, that particularly African American students in the US college they were examining reported much greater sense of general health and also a much greater sense of subjective happiness. And we believe that in terms of trying to help improve students' sense of well-being, particularly after such a difficult couple of years, that help bolstering the sense of belonging within the classroom might actually be very useful in terms of overcoming some of the challenges that students may face. In terms of physics specifically, we think this may also be the case. Recent research from Serenian and colleagues in 2018 have suggested that women tend to report a lesser sense of belonging in the class than men. There are a number of self-perceptions that tend to disadvantage women within undergraduate physics, including that women often report less self-efficacy, which is a confidence in their ability compared to men. So men tend to be more confident in their ability to complete physics tasks than women. And similarly, women tend not to see themselves as physicists to the same extent as men, and don't identify with the discipline to the same extent. So there are a number of things that might negatively impact women, but the first one is something that we're very interested in, and particularly for this talk, and that's this sort of relationship between gender and belonging, and how this all relates to student well-being. So we ran a study and we had two sort of general hypotheses. One that due to the recent studies by Serenian colleagues, we believe that women would have a lower sense of belonging and well-being compared to men. And our second hypothesis was that we believe the relationship between belonging and well-being might be stronger for men than it is for women. When we compare the associations between the two, we had a feeling that perhaps men might relate their sense of belonging in physics to their well-being to a greater extent than women. So we decided to examine this. So we collected a study of 310 physics students, 105 women, 205 men. These were students from all years of the undergraduate, right from the introductory level even up to the integrated master's level. So all with about 5 levels at this university. The survey was given to them just prior to their lecture or the workshop, so we asked them as they were going into if they would be willing to fill these surveys out. And it measured their sense of belonging, identification with physics as a discipline, their self-efficacy and their sense of well-being. And this was all done at a small research-intensive university in the UK. So our first hypothesis was, we expected men to report greater sense of belonging and well-being compared to women, and our results of our initial study suggested that was overwhelmingly not the case. I'm going to make myself disappear here so you can see. But yeah, so we examined the differences here using simple t-tests. And we found that actually there were no significant differences between men and women in terms of reported belonging and reported well-being on our course. However, we did see significant differences with regards to students' self-efficacy and in terms of their students' physics identification, with men reporting again to a greater extent than women, which suggests that yes, men were both most confident in their ability than women, and also they identified with physics as a discipline to a greater extent than women, as can be seen by the p-value on the right hand side here. But crucially, for our study, our key variables that we're interested in, belonging and well-being, we saw no significant differences. So we then wanted to see whether or not these variables, how these variables related to well-being, and whether or not these variables were able to predict well-being for men and women. So for this, we ran a regression, a simultaneous regression, examining these relationships, and we were interested to see what the differences were between men and women. So there were two simple regressions we ran, multiple linear regressions, simultaneous multiple linear regressions, looking at how these variables all predicted well-being. These betas here are an indicator of the direction and strength of the relationship between these variables, and the p-values will tell you whether or not these relationships were significant. So to begin with, we looked at physics identification, and for both men and women, physics identity failed to predict the sense of well-being beyond self-efficacy and belonging. So it didn't seem to significantly predict well-being for men or for women. Conversely, confidence in ability in physics, or self-efficacy rather, did predict well-being for both men and women. But rather crucially, and again, the variables we're interested in, belonging predicted well-being for men, but failed to predict well-being for women. So it's possible here, although further examination will need to be done with regards to the causal links here, it's possible here that men might be benefiting from a sense of belonging, and that might be translating into well-being. However, that doesn't seem to be the case for the women in our sample. So why is this? Well, there's a lot of reasons that could be, and again, unfortunately, this is a correlational study, so we've got to be a little bit careful about what conclusions we draw. But it could be that women just don't identify with physics to the same extent. So we saw that in our own sample here, that women reported lesser identification with physics. So it could be, although women feel like they belong as part of the physics cohort, because they don't identify with the discipline to the same extent, it doesn't really matter that they belong. So it's not very important to them in a way that they belong as part of the physics cohort because they don't identify with physics as a discipline to the same extent. So that's one possibility. Another possibility is that women who derive their well-being from a sense of belonging might not pick physics. It's very well documented that women are underrepresented in physics, so it is a possibility that women might be put off by the fact that there are so few women, and if they were really interested in deriving their sense of belonging from well-being from belonging rather, they may not pick physics as a discipline. Or it could be that there are other factors that are just more important for women in physics. The large differences we see in self-efficacy across, and well-documented differences we see between men and women in self-efficacy might be more important. So it might be the case we saw in our study as well, that self-efficacy is quite a strong predictor of well-being, and is the strongest predictor of well-being for women. So it might be that they just derive the well-being from the sense of self-efficacy and from other sources that aren't really belonging as part of the physics cohort. So there is one very key future question that we want to address here. So it seems to be that the social cure may be benefiting men, but might not be benefiting women to the same extent. But one thing we can't tell from this study as well is this just a case for the undergraduate physics students that we've examined today, or could it be the case for all underrepresented groups in education? It's very possible that all underrepresented groups might be experiencing this lack of the social cure. So to very quickly summarise, contrary to our hypothesis, women in undergraduate physics reported similar levels of belonging and well-being as men. The self-efficacy predicted well-being for both men and women, but belonging predicted well-being for men, but not for women. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me at this email address. Thank you.